Okay. Is recording? Yeah. Erev Tov, everyone. I was told that learning the Mesillat Yesharim is a bit like eating spinach. So I hope you like spinach. But if not, we'll try and make it a little bit more enjoyable than that. So we've been discussing, the Ramchal in the first chapter talks about Biur Klal Chovat Ha'adam Be'olamo. What is man's duty in this world? What are we here for? Before we can get to how to do it, what we've been doing wrong, what we've been doing right. But the question is, why are we here? What are we meant to do? Don't ask what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country, right? And he starts off by telling us essentially that we're here for our own benefits. We're here for good. Hashem is the ultimate good. He wants to give us the ultimate good. And the way that we can achieve the ultimate good is by earning it. So we're here to earn it in this world and to receive it in the next world. And essentially this idea, the Ramchal talks about like so many times, and so many ideas that we have in Judaism and in Torah, you have two extreme philosophies that exist out there, and we try and find a synthesis between the two. There are those very, very prevalent in the Western world that say we're here for the here and now. There is this world, and this world is all that there is. Right? Let's eat and drink, and let's enjoy ourselves as much as we can while we're here, because tomorrow we're gone. That is one extreme philosophy. Clearly, we don't subscribe to that. Now, there's a story that's told of the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, meaning not the last one, because there may come as a surprise to some, but there is no current Rebbe. But the last Rebbe of Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson, before them, it was known as the previous Rebbe, the Rebbe Riyaz of Yosef Yitzchak Schneerson. So he was arrested and interrogated in communist Russia. And the story is told that he was sitting, the interrogator or interrogators, whoever it was, they pointed a gun at him. And they said, you see this toy in my hand, this toy has a way of making people talk. And he said, not with me. He said, that can only frighten somebody who believes in many gods and one world. But I believe in one God and two worlds. And therefore, I'm not scared of that. And that's the idea. That's not just Olam Hazeh, but there's also the Olam Haba. So you have that philosophy. That is one philosophy. There's another philosophy that exists that completely disregards Olam Hazeh and says it's only about Olam Haba, and we're not going to get any benefit, and we're not going to get any enjoyment, and we're going to live life as completely ascetic and reject the world entirely. Right? That is a philosophy that exists in the wider world. And comes to Ramchal and says, no, the Torah says something in between the two. We believe in Olam Hazeh and Olam Haba, meaning we're here not to worship this world, not to use this world for its own sake, but to use this world as a tool to get into the next world as well. And then he says the following. He says, Im ta'amik od be'inyan tireh, ki ha'olam nivra l'shimush ha'adam. So on the one hand, yes, it's true. We're talking about what am I here for? What do I have to do to the world? But he says the world was created for our use. Omnam hu omed b'shikul gadol. כי אם האדם נמשך אחר העולם, הוא מתרחק מבוראו, הנה הוא מתקלקל ומקלקל העולם עמו, ואם הוא שולט בעצמו ונדבק בבוראו, משתמש מן העולם רק להיות לא סיור לעבודה פה, הוא מתעלה והעולם עצמו מתעלה עמו. Says the Ramchal, that what I do, I need to be aware that I'm here in the world, everything that I do affects not just me, but it affects the entire world around me as well. Right? The famous Rambam in Ilchot Shuvah, based on Gemara and Kiddushin, essentially says a very similar idea. Says that a person should view himself as if he's 50-50, right? That's what the Gemara says in Kiddushin, and the Rambam writes in Ilchot Shuvah, Le'olam yireh adam ki'ilu chetyo chayav v'chetyo zakah. Imagine ourselves. It says, yireh atzmo ki'ilu. We should imagine it, because clearly it's not actually like this, 50-50. But we imagine ourselves as if everything is poised, right? Completely evenly poised for myself, for my community, for my country, and for the world. And every action that I do has the potential to save the world or to destroy the world, right? That's what the Ramchal says. He says all the things that I do affect not just me, but affects my environment, affects everything around me as well. Right? And he goes on and he says, he brings a number of proofs for this, that we see in the Torah that even inanimate objects, in a certain sense, right, can be elevated when they are used by human beings and used for the purposes of Avodat Hashem. So one example he brings, we just had it in the Parashot HaShavua a few weeks ago, right? When Yaakov Avinu is lying down and he goes to sleep, and it says he takes the stones and he places the stones around his head, right? And the stones begin to argue, Right? Of course, it doesn't mean literally that the stone started speaking. Right? Midrash is trying to teach us a message, but essentially, why each stone says, "Alai yaniach tzadik l'sho, v'alai yaniach tzadik l'sho." Each stone says, "I want to be used. I want to be elevated for the purposes of Avodat Hashem." And I think we discussed, and there the Gemara says, and Rashi tells us over there that what happened, that when Yaakov goes to sleep, there are stones, and when he wakes up, there is one stone, right? And it's the stones all been merged into one. And we discussed, how does that solve the fights between them? And the answer is that now, even though his head is still in the same place and it's still the same part of the stone that is used to rest Yaakov's head, but nonetheless, when the stones view themselves as separate entities, so then they can have a fight. But when they're all part of the same entity, just as your left hand does not argue with your right hand, just as your heart does not argue with your kidneys, right? So too, all the stones are one, and the mashal for that, of course, is how we view ourselves as a nation, as Am Yisrael. But in any event, going back to this, so Ramchal continues. ראה מעשה האלוקים, בשעה שברא הקדוש ברוך הוא את האדם הראשון, נטלו והחזירו הכל אילני גן עדן, ואמר לו, right? Hashem, when he created the first man, took Adam Arishon and he took him throughout all the trees in Gan Eden, and he said to him, see how pleasant, see how beautiful all my deeds are. Everything I've created, I've created for you. Now don't mess it up. Don't destroy the world, but take benefit of it. And in a similar idea that they say that we say a person should view himself, should say Bishvili nivra ha'olam, right? There's a famous story as well. The Kenigsberg Rabbi, well, it's quoted in the name of the Kenigsberg, it's quoted in the name of others as well, but says that a person should have two pieces of paper in your pockets. In the one pocket you have a piece of paper that says Bishvili nivra ha'olam, the world was created for me. And the other one says, "V'anochi afar va'efra," I'm nothing, I'm dust and ashes. And then those two things will keep you in check. The bottom line is this: person was not created for the purpose of this world. Is not the end in and of itself. But for our situation, it will be in the next world. But it's not that this world is to be disregarded. This is a means to an end.
פסוק אחד אומר להשם הארץ וברא.
כן.
פסוק שני אומר השמיים שמיים והשמיים והארץ עשתה לבני. אומרת הגמרא לה קשה. כאן לפני ברכה להשם הארץ וברא. הכל שייך להשם.
כן.
אין ברכה השמיים שמיים והשם והארץ עשתה לבני.
בדיוק. Everything is given to us in order to use, in order to elevate for that purpose. So it says, there are many statements of Chazal, many proofs of this, where this world is compared to the place of preparation, and the next world is compared to the place of reward. So, for example, it says this world is like a prosdor, is like a corridor. Today, this world is the time to observe, and the next world is the day to receive the rewards. Somebody who prepares on Erev Shabbat will have food to eat on Shabbat. This world is Erev Shabbat, the next world compared to Shabbat. The Gemara takes it one step further. It says that Shabbat, the concept of Shabbat, is 1/60th of Olam Haba. It gives us a taste. Why 1/60th? We know that if you have food, for example, you have a drop of meat and milk, or you have a mixture, right? So if it's less than one, if it's 1/60th, already that is the proportion where we say you can taste that element, and therefore it will no longer be nullified. So Shabbat is 1/60th. It's a taste of the world to come. Gives us in the sense that we can't create anything new. What we've created, what we've prepared before Shabbat, what we've prepared before the next world, that's all we have. Another example in Kohelet Rabbah says, this world is like an island, the next world is like the ocean. Okay, and there are many, many examples of this. Now, by the way, last time we spoke about this, somebody asked me, he's not here today, but hopefully you'll see the recording, but somebody said, we're talking so much about Olam Hazeh, Olam Haba, why is it that in the Torah, in the Chumash, there is no mention, certainly no explicit mention of Olam Haba, right? Throughout the entire Chumash, really Tanakh, talks about this world, does not talk about the world to come. So there are those who misunderstood based on that, and there are those who thought, this world to come, this Olam Haba business, this is all an invention of the rabbis. It doesn't really exist. That's why the Torah never spoke about it. And later generations came along and invented it. That is not the case. And as the Ramchal quotes here, many sources in Chazal talking about the concept of Olam Haba. It's always been a part of our tradition. For the purposes of the Shiur, we're going to take as axiomatic that the Torah Sheba'al Peh is faithful and is true, and we can rely on that. So why is it that it was so obvious, but it's not mentioned? It's not mentioned in the Torah at all. The concept of Olam Haba. So it's true that after the times of after the period of Tanakh, and later on in the period of Torah Sheba'al Peh, and maybe particularly after the Churban Rishon, you find more of a focus in Chazal and more of a focus in Jewish life, talking about the world to come that did not exist beforehand. It's not to say that the concept wasn't there, but it's to say that's not the primary focus. So all the Rishonim discuss this, and all the Rishonim have got different answers as to why it should be that Olam Haba is not mentioned in the Chumash. There are those who say it's so obvious it doesn't need to be mentioned. Okay, and the Ramchal is going to talk about that as well. But there are those who say, ideally, primarily, the Torah is a book of instruction. The Torah is a book of living, and the Torah is telling us what we are meant to do and how we are meant to live. There is no instruction, as it were, for the purposes of Olam Haba, and that is maybe one reason why it's not mentioned. The Ran says something very, very interesting. It says the Torah was given at a time when the surrounding cultures, if you look Egypt, for example, there's a large focus on death. Everything in Egypt, we spoke at the beginning, how there are different cultures. Some focus on Olam Hazeh, some focus on the next world. In Egypt, everything was all about the afterlife. And in the ancient world, there was a very, very big focus on this. And Torah is coming to teach us that our main focus, certainly now, is not on, there is an afterlife of sorts, right, that exists, but that's not what we're here, there's not much that we can do about it unless we act in the proper way that we are meant to in this world and utilize it to the best of our abilities. So that is another reason that is given. And there are other explanations as well, many explanations, in fact. But we take it as axiomatic that, yes, there is a concept of Olam Haba, but it's our purpose is to do what we can in this world in order to achieve that reward there. And he says, תראה באמת שכבר לא יוכל שום בעלי שכל להאמין שתכלית בריאת העולם הוא למצבו בעולם הזה. The Ramchal gives of himself two proofs as to why it should be that there is such a concept of Olam Haba. He says, first of all, it doesn't make sense. It just doesn't make sense to say that there is only this world. What is, at the end of the day, what can a person achieve in עולם הזה? או מי הוא שמח ושלב ממש בעולם הזה, ימי שנתנו בהם 70 שנה ואם בגבורת 80 שנה ורבם עמל ואבן. The famous pasuk in Tehillim, David HaMelech says, a person is for 70 years with strength for 80 years, right? Even if we say up to 120, okay, if you look in the broad sweep of history and the context of eternity of what there is, one lifetime is very, 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 very small. וכמה מיני צער וחולאים וכאבים וטרדות ואחר כל זאת המוות. And again, if we understand what we said at the beginning, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is Tov, He is goodness, He is the ultimate goodness, He created us ultimately for our benefit. So a person is born to the world that is full of suffering and full of sickness and full of problems and full of travails, and after 80 years or however long of struggle, a person dies. אחד בני אלף לא יימצא שהרבה העולם לו הנאות ושווה אמיתית. By the way, again, the Ramchal is writing here a few hundred years ago. At least the things he's talking about on a material level, right? The situation of mankind, the situation of humanity has improved many, many, many times over. But still, nonetheless, he says a person's going to live their life, whatever benefit and peace and tranquility that you may find, nonetheless, after that, it's all over, right? That's what HaKadosh Baruch Hu created us for. That's the ultimate goodness. He says, no, there's got to be more to it than that. Number one. He says, ולא עוד, אלא שאם תכלית בריאת העולם היה לצורך העולם הזה, לא היה צורך מפני זה שתנופח בו נשמה כל כך חשובה ועליונה, שתהיה גדולה יותר מן המלאכים עצמם, כל שכן שאינה מוציאה שום נחת רוח בכל נוגע זה העולם. He says, further than that, he says the Ramchal, you have a neshama that comes from a world that is purely spiritual. There is so much greater. It says that a person is born, when you come into the world against your will and you leave the world against your will. The neshama doesn't want to be constrained by a body, doesn't want to be constrained by all the things that are in this world. And it's very, very difficult for a person to find satisfaction. Right? Sometimes the Baal Shem Tov says that sometimes when a person has a thirst for hunger, thirst, etc., for bodily desires, he says it's actually the neshama, and that is the way that the neshama is thirsting for something more. People are looking for something bigger. There is an unquenchable thirst for spirituality, for closeness to Hashem, that the neshama cannot actually achieve in this world. There are elements and there are glimpses of it that we can get. But he says, so what's the point? Why would HaKadosh Baruch Hu take that neshama and remove it from next to the Kisei HaKavod and bring it down and restrict it and constrain it in such a way in this world? That can't be the ultimate purpose. So based on these two reasons, he says, that is his proof to us that it is not just about Olam Hazeh, but we are leading up towards something more, something greater in Olam Haba, and not to be distracted and not to be fooled and not to think that this is all that there is, but to use the word properly, to do what we have to do in order to achieve that ultimate reward. Rabbi Hanania ben Akasha Omer, Tzakadosh Baruch Hu lezakot Yisrael, לפיכך בא להם תורה מצוות, 12 רכבת מן, צדקו, יגדיר תורה וידיר.